All right, I think we're about ready to start, everyone. Hi, I'm Jenna Lacqua. Steve Dyer will be emceeing this evening, but I should say hello as host. It's really weird to have your screen share on because then I couldn't see who was here and who wasn't. So we'll work on that for next week. And now, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan. Hi, folks. Good evening. It's good to see a bunch of familiar faces. And welcome everyone to the 2020 HistoryMaker Awards, Part 1. I'm Steve Dyer. I'll be your host for the evening yet again. Thanks for having me back. We really appreciate that you've joined us in this little virtual universe to show your support for the organization and for this year's HistoryMaker and Lavender Rhino Award honorees. The mission of the History Project is to document and preserve the history of Boston's LGBTQ communities and to share that history with other LGBTQ individuals, organizations, allies, and the public. So if you didn't know, now you know. So much of what the History Project does is about creating spaces for people to come together around LGBTQ history and life. And in this, it's a very loaded word, and I put it in there, in this unprecedented year, a year filled with so much more than ever before, the History Project has been working real hard to create spaces online where community members can come together to talk about LGBTQ history, to meet others interested in LGBTQ history, and to frankly have some fun and, at least for a moment, set the troubles and uncertainties in pandemics and elections and tax returns and other things aside. So since April this year, History Project staff and volunteers have hosted 18 virtual out of the archives events that have reached a combined audience of more than 1,000 people from around the world. Recordings of these virtual events are available for all to freely access on our YouTube page, where they've been viewed for by more than 2,000 people as well from around the world. And tonight, you'll learn a little bit more about the volunteer-driven work of the History Project. You'll have a chance to meet some of the other attendees. And finally, you'll hear from our Lavender Rhino Award honoree, activist, organizer, frontline healthcare worker, Chastity Bowick, who is executive director of the Transgender Emergency Fund of Massachusetts. And she will be in conversation with the iconic Athena Vaughn. But first, I'd like to introduce History Project board member Jessica Taylor, who will discuss one of the organization's current collecting initiatives, #QueerArchivesAtHome. And then we'll hop into some break rooms to bring a little of that HistoryMaker Awards schmoozing magic to life. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jessica Taylor.
Thanks so much, Steve. Joan, am I going to share my screen, or are you going to put up the slides?
I will share my screen.
Okay, thank you. So hi, everybody. I'm Jessica. I joined the History Project board basically in March of this year. I've been a volunteer here for about 2 years since I moved to Cambridge from Canada. Like many organizations, our physical location has been closed since March. So one of the things that we've been doing, as Stephen mentioned, our Out of the Archive series, but one of the other things that we've been doing to get people engaged and continuing to share archival material and stories about LGBTQ history is we have had a social media and digital archiving project called Queer Archives at Home. Basically, it's a crowdsourced digital archives of photos, stories, and personal histories. And I'll drop a couple of links in the chat after I'm done so that you can follow up on any of these things that you want. So this is our call for submissions, and they're still open if anyone wants to submit something. Basically, the idea is you take a look around you and see, what do I have here that expresses some bit of my own personal history, but of LGBTQ history in general. And we've gotten some very interesting things in there. We've gotten about 30 submissions so far. Stories and artifacts range from the early 1970s to today. There's stories about coming out, anti-gay discrimination in employment, pride, LGBTQ incarceration and abolition, prison abolition, the AIDS crisis, trans nightlife in the 1980s. Here, Jonah's got some slides of some examples from April and May that we posted to Instagram. We've been posting them to some of them to our Instagram and Facebook. So this is from 2006, submitted by one of the History Project volunteers. So this is our own queer history. But then we also have a 1990s poster from Ramrod that someone took a photo of that they have, and the story of how they got the poster. A really recent May 2020 photo from a volunteer and member of Black and Pink, which is a prison abolition and also does pen pals and writing with LGBTQ people in prison. So this is a photo that they sent of the kind of work that's going on right now. So it's, we've seen stuff from early 2000s back to the 70s, 90s, and even, the archiving of the now. If you want to know more, I'll drop links for our social media and also for the digital archive itself, where you can see everything. Finally, I'm going to show you a picture to spur discussion once we go into the break rooms, which is my own submission to this. And I took a photo of these zines that I have that all from the early 2000s. They were part of a project I was doing with the LGBTQ student group at my university. We had a zine for, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years. And I have mostly the issues that I helped out with. The top one is called Celebrating 175 Years of Queers at the University of Toronto. This one is full of plays on university marketing and branding, but adding the queer people back in. So I kept these in part because things like zines, things like the posters from Ramod, often they can be very ephemeral. They're not necessarily collected. We can't necessarily find them in a library or even in an archive that's not like the History Project. So it was important to me to keep them as my personal history so that I can go back and look and remember what we did, but also for future people who are interested in what were LGBTQ people doing in the early 2000s. This is only one example of what we were doing, but I think it's, I kind of like to think of people in the future looking at them and thinking, oh, so that's what they were talking about. Our ideas about what it means to do queer activism in a university have really changed, or our attitudes about bathroom cruising are exactly the same, or how we talk about gender has really changed. So that's why I keep it, and hopefully one day I'll be able to donate them to so that people can look at them and think about the 2000s. What were they like? So we're going to take a couple minutes in breakout rooms to chat with each other as a break before we get to our History Makers conversation with Chastity Bowick. In the rooms, share something that you can think of that might tell your story. When we come back, we can put your answers in the chat and we'll share a few with the group. Have fun.
Okay, and we're back. Joan, did you? I just want to make sure that all of my legal requirements that you've pinned my face to be the big face.
Sure.
It's okay. As long as I'm the one who's talking, then we're good. So I hope everyone had. We were in there for 5 minutes. We had a very intense connection. People were just sharing. I don't know. I'm a little bit worked up. People were being very cute. So hopefully people can drop some stuff in the chat, and I can talk about them a little bit. But so in preparation for this, I think the kickoff for this whole project was at the last history project, and Joan was like, we would love something particularly from your collection to start this off. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna do something. So if anyone was at the History Project Awards last year, you'll remember that I donated a pair of red booty shorts that I had hand glittered and I had put on my own rhinestones. And they were very meaningful for me because first of all, I used to fit in them. And second of all, it was for the first time I went to P-Town for the 4th of July. It was a time when patriotism was okay, a much earlier time. And it was just like, that big meaningful thing of like preparing for to go to P-Town for the 4th of July. And so those are actually in the archives. And so I wanted to be able to kind of one up that this year. But unfortunately, I am in between apartments and all of my stuff is in storage. So I just have a general moment of queer history, which is, if you can see that, this is the Lady Gaga Chromatica jockstrap that she released as a gimmick to make white gay men buy her CD so that she could get because streams don't count as much as CD purchases, and so I purchased that in April, and it just arrived this week, and so that's kind of history. Yeah, so apparently it worked, and that I do love the experience of watching people laugh silently at me. That is very delightful. So anyway, I hope that was fun and meaningful. Drop it in if you have anything else, if you want to because you can type up a little story in the chat if anything was meaningful, please do that. But in the meanwhile, I should have modeled it. Kenneth, everyone can read the chat. That's to everyone. So just be aware that sometimes it's everyone and sometimes it's private. That's the way that Zoom works. So anyway, I'm now going to hand it over to Joan. Joan, you can take my big face off now and make me a small face.
All right, spotlight's canceled. I'm sharing my screen for the 3rd time this evening for this little program. And basically, I'm here. I'm Jenna Lacqua. I'm executive director of the History Project. If you've come to our virtual events, you've seen me here on Zoom. If you've come to our events in person, you've probably seen me hanging around our office at Back Bay. So I'm just taking a brief moment to say some thank yous tonight before we introduce Chastity. And first of all, thank you so much, Chastity, for being here with us, for taking some time to talk to us over Zoom. And thank you, Athena, as well, for being part of this conversation. And on the History Project side of things, I'd like to thank the awards planning committee that planned this series, and this year includes Carissa Cunningham, Andrew Elder, Ben Federlin, Tony Grima, Jessica Taylor, and me. The sheer number of Zoom meetings necessary to do our work remotely is staggering. I'm sure many of you can relate. And I'd like to thank especially our MC, Steve Dyer, who will be here with us throughout the month. And now I'd like to thank the members of our host committee, without whom we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do, and who really helped us to support this event series. And this year, our underground historians are Libby Bouvier and Andrea Devine, Andrew Elder and Jose Ricardo McFarlane Figueroa, Jim Gibson, Pat Gazemba and Karen Kahn, Tony Grima and Peter Muse, Jonah Lacqua and Sarah Marina, Marvin Kabikoff, Mark Crone, Louise Rice, Martha Stone, Jessica Taylor, and Kenneth Torino and Christopher Matias. Next, I'd like to thank those who donated at our direct action documenter level. Those are Bruce Bell and George Smart, Nan Dumas, Neil Kane and Charles Schoonmaker, Stuart Landers, Russ Lopez, and Andrew Sherman. And finally, the individual who contributed at our community curator level, Kevin Hepner. Thank you all for making this event possible, for supporting the work of the History Project. And thank you for those who have donated, either at the Friend of the History Project level or just in general to the History Project. If you want to learn more about our sponsors and supporters and about every other event in this series, please visit historyproject.org/events or keep an eye on your email. I will be emailing you. So I would now like to introduce, and I shouldn't have stopped my screen share so soon. I would now like to introduce, there we go, Chastity Bowick, who is Executive Director of the Transgender Emergency Fund of Massachusetts. And Chastity is one of this year's Lavender Rhino Award honorees. The Transgender Emergency Fund is the only organization dedicated to supporting low-income and homeless transgender individuals in Massachusetts. The Transgender Emergency Fund assists with homelessness prevention, shelter assistance, nutrition assistance, prescription copay assistance, transportation, and escort to medical appointments, among many other life-saving services. Tonight, Chastity will be in conversation with Athena Vaughn, who is a trans activist and legend in the BAL community, and I believe a Celtics Massachusetts hero of 2020. Chastity and Athena will be in conversation with each other. I'll moderate a little Q&A toward the end of their conversation with our audience, so please feel free to use the chat or I'll unmute you using that hand raise function. And with that, welcome Chastity and Athena, and congratulations, Chastity, our 2020 Lavender Rhino awardee.
Thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. So let's see. And Athena is here, right?
I am here. I'm sorry,
Awesome.
I'm in the car.
Oh,
Excuse
no.
my bonnet here. Thank you all for having us. So happy to be here.
All right. So I sent you both some questions if you wanted to ask each other, or I can ask you the questions if you'd rather do it that way.
You can ask us.
Okay, cool. Let me pull up the questions. The first question I have is basically a background question for those of us who don't know. Could you tell us more about the Transgender Emergency Fund, what it is that you do, how it started, and how you became involved with it?
Awesome, sure. So the Transgender Emergency Fund started off in 2008 by Jesse Pack, who is a trans man who resided in Worcester, and a group of other of his friends during that time came together to support a trans woman who was in need of housing assistance. So they came together, telling their friends, their family members, and they raised more money than they expected to raise. So they started to, why not just keep this fund going and start what's called now the Transgender Emergency Fund to assist low income and homeless trans folks. It started off in Worcester, but then they immediately started assisting trans folks across the state of Massachusetts. I came into play around 2012, seeking assistance for myself for the Transgender Emergency Fund. After leaving an abusive relationship here in Boston, I found myself homeless, rejected from homeless shelters, especially from women homeless shelters, which led me to the streets, to survival sex work, to survival drug use. Until one day a friend told me about the Transgender Emergency Fund, and I called them. Jesse immediately told me to go to South Station and sent me a ticket to get from Boston to Worcester. They put me up in a hotel for the weekend, and then that Monday they had found a safe room for me to stay in for the next 3 months. And during that time, I was able to get my own things together, get my mental health together, and figure out what it is that I want out of this life. And one of the main things was to give back to my community, because during those critical times, trying to reach out for help, I didn't have no elders or anyone to look up to guide me out of that situation that I was in. And so I wanted to be that for my community. So I started off in Worcester. I started volunteering for the Transgender Emergency Fund, and then actually obtained employment at AIDS Project Worcester, who was the Transgender Emergency Fund physical sponsor at the time, and started volunteering in 2014. 2015, I became the volunteer executive director. And that's when I was relocating back to Boston. and I took a position at AIDS Action Committee as the transgender coordinator of their Transcend program. And that is where I met the wonderful and comparable Athena Vaughn. We met each other actually at the award ceremony where I received the Belinda Dunn Award. And she was the speaker that introduced me, and unbeknownst to us, that Monday I was her supervisor. So that's pretty much how our relationship started. I still continue to keep the work of the Transgender Emergency Fund going with me when I moved to Boston, but it was a little struggle. But in 2016, we were able to obtain our own 501c3. And since then, it has been slowly, steadily getting to where we need to be, but not exactly where we need to be, because we need to obtain a building to where we can start our transitional housing program. So to this date, I am still the director of the Transgender Emergency Fund. Athena will talk a little bit more about the march that was held back in June, which allowed us to raise over $100,000 to start this transitional housing program. So I'm very excited about this. We also just started our nutrition program back in May, where every 2 weeks we deliver fresh produce to low-income, transgender, and gender nonconforming folks across the state of Massachusetts. We will be starting our mental health program next month, which will be called our Care and Support Program, where members of our community can get virtual mental health counseling at no cost to them. You know, no insurance is required. TEF will be paying for this because a lot of our clients who are between the ages of 18 and 24, they are still on their parents' health insurance, and they don't want their parents to know what type of counseling they're seeking, if it's about gender identity and things of that nature. So we want to keep this very secure and private for them as well. So many wonderful things are blooming for the Transgender Emergency Fund. And once we have our physical location where we can actually house people for 3 to 6 months, where they are provided the tools and resources needed to be sustainable. And also on the other side of that, we will have our community-based organization where we're doing career development, counseling and testing. We want to have a food bank, a clothing store where people can come in and just get free clothing, especially during this time when it's about to get cold. We know how our New England weather is, and this is the time of year where our application is an uptake. We get more and more applicants. So any little bit of assistance, any donations, any volunteering assistance, we greatly encourage. For more information, please visit the transgenderemergencyfund.org. You can find out more information about upcoming events, previous events, and just please sign up for our email listing. And I would like to take it on to Athena to tell you a little bit more about the march, how it came about, and introduce trans resistance.
Hey everyone. So back in June, so for a few years now, Chastity and I have been talking about
You're muted.
can you hear me now? That is bad. So for a few years now, Chastity, when I first met Chastity, she had talked about doing a march, and I, asked if I would join in and help her and stuff like that, and I said yeah. We ended up going to DC last year for the Trans March, and really was inspired. But then COVID going on and everything, we didn't know what was next, and so we ended up. So with Boston Pride doing what they did, where they removed the Black Lives Matter statement from out of their newsletter that they sent out, it really sent an uproar to everyone, because it's first of all, instead of standing in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, it just was like a slap in the face to know that the organization and everything that it stands for was created by trans people of color and gender nonconforming people of color. So it turned into, I was supposed to speak at the flag raising and was not able to. Can you all hold on for 2 seconds? Excuse me.
While we're waiting for Athena, I just want to point out that I did put the link to the website of the Trans Emergency Fund in the chat. If you don't see that, I have it up to I'm going to spend some time perusing it after this event. So that's something we could do while we wait for Athena.
So while we wait for Athena, I guess I'll take this time to tell you about some upcoming events that the Transgender Emergency Fund has coming up. So next week on October 8th, Transgender Emergency Fund has partnered with the Museum of Science, and we will be hosting a virtual ball, our back to school ball, the pandemic edition. So the ball will be online. You can go to the, excuse me, my puppy is going crazy. You can go online to Facebook, to the Museum of Science page, and there you can get tickets for the online events. And then also coming up, which we'll be advertising next week, so you all get a early snippet. The Transgender Emergency Fund is hosting our first ever Transgender Women Weekend Retreat. So the first weekend in November, we have rented out a large Airbnb in Maine, where we'll be hosting 25 transgender women of all different races and ages, where we'll be having professional development over this course, over the 2 days. We'll be having also different sessions on transgender sisterhood and building relationships amongst each other. And what I want our women to take away from this weekend is not only to know how to conduct yourselves when trying to obtain social services, like, you know, trying to go get a new social security card or going to apply for a job in person. We have to do things a certain way because everybody are already looking at us 10 times harder. And I just want some of my women, girls who think like, I can never work in hospital, or we can't get these types of jobs. Yes, we can. And we can, and we will. But sometimes it's about the education that's needed. Like, I wasn't educated on certain things. My parents didn't teach me how to balance a checkbook. These are things I had to learn on my own. And I want my girls to know these things. So when they step out into these offices or go try to obtain that job down at Boston Medical or Mass General, they know how to present themselves in a professional, respectable manner. So I'm very excited about that, and you'll see it, flyers around going about Facebook, for people who want to sponsor, certain things that we're going to need for that weekend, PPE, all of those good things. So I'm very excited about that.
Awesome. And so, oh, maybe
So
Athena's...
sorry, I'm back.
Oh, good. Welcome back.
Forgive me. I had a very important phone call to take from my house. So I just moved into the house, and today makes officially a month that I've been there. So my landlord can be a little stickler. But picking up, so yes. So also, if you want, the Transgender Emergency Fund is also accepting donations / sponsorships for that retreat. So please go on the website and donate. And when you donate, say what it is for. And then also keeping in mind going back. So we wanted to do the retreat, and then so we wanted to do a march. And so I remember some individuals reached out to me about their march that they were putting together and asked if I would be one of the speakers. So I said, sure. And then they asked if I would be helpful on the planning committee to put it all together. And I again said, sure, I would not mind. Turned into the next day when I woke up, I had a whole bunch of messages asking if I would take over and put the march together and be in charge of stuff like that. And I was like, I don't know if that's what I want to do. But I remember after everything, they was like, people want to donate money. Where can we donate money to? And I was like, I think meeting with Sasha, I was talking to Sasha about what was going on. And she was like, well, we'll see if they'll allow the Transgender Emergency Fund to be where the money can be donated to. I said, that's actually a great idea because I know that Chastity wants to, start being able to look for a transitional housing place where we can work out of / house our girls who are really dealing with everyday life issues. And so I remember I called Chastity and was like, so listen, they want to have a march, okay? They want to have a march, and they want us to come on board, and they want to donate all funds to the Transgender Emergency Fund. And so Chastity was like, okay, well, of course, more information, stuff like that. So I said, we're supposed to have a meeting tonight, first kickoff meeting, so we can do what we need to do. Turned into, they're like, okay, so we're going to do the march on June 13th. And so I'm on the Zoom call, and I'm like, June 13th is in 7 days. Y'all know that, right? And so it was just amazing because while we were in the planning process, there were a whole bunch of people hitting me up saying, do you know anybody that's trying to do a march? And so I told everybody, like, hold off, we've got something in the works. Once everything is settled, we'll start sending out links and groups for people to join to be able to help create. And so that's what happened. So it turned into everybody having a part in this. Everybody had their parts where, because I don't know everybody. Chastity don't know everybody. Even though everybody might know us, we don't know everybody. Sometimes you remember people by face, sometimes you remember them by name. And so everybody networked together to be able to be sure that we are able to reach everybody in the state of Massachusetts to be able to come together and do this. And so the march came, and the word resistance came to me when we was meeting, and they asked what your cause us. And I said, well, we're trans, so of course that's going to be in there. And I'm like, so how about we trans resistant? Because we're resisting what it is that's going on in the world today, especially the treatment towards Black trans individuals of color. So we ended up doing the meeting, doing the march and everything. And so it came in where everyone was like, we want to still do this every year. We should continue to do this every year. And so I said, okay, well, let me just meet with some of the powers that be and see what it is that we can do. And so that's how we created Trans Resistance. And so now Trans Resistance is its own entity, and we do most of the social justice work. We're going to do the march/visual every year / turn it into our own trans pride, have a week of festivities and stuff like that so that everyone can feel a part and feel actually appreciated when it comes to their community the right way, and not feel like, we always have to use the bureaucrats to get what it is that we need, where if we ask our community will support us to 100%. So one of the questions I noticed that also about donating and stuff like that, if you go to transresistancemass.com, we have a website up now. There's a PayPal donate button that you can donate to, and then of course in the notes write what it is that you're donating to. Also know that all money that comes in goes right back to community work, whether it's events, whether it's to help trans girls, or whether it's to help the LGBT community altogether. We don't keep money unless it's to push for something that we're doing in events. We don't get paid for this work that we do. As far as trans resistance, we don't get paid for the work that we do, and so we're also looking for volunteers going into the new year and stuff like that as well. So yeah, so we are in the midst of planning, and then also I might as well just tackle TDOR as well. So usually MTPC will put together a board and everything to help with doing Trans Day of Remembrance. And so a few years ago, I know Chastity was one of the chairs, and last year, I believe it was last year or the year before last, I was actually one of the caterers for the dinner itself, for the dinner part of the Trans Day of Remembrance. So this year we're trying to take back what Trans Day of Remembrance actually is. And so Trans Day of Remembrance, if you all remember, was created in honor of Rita Hester, who was a trans woman of color who was murdered. And so it's not that we don't appreciate what has been going on, but we also want to keep things in the spirit of what they actually are meant to be. And so Trans Resistance, being a board of full true diversity, agreed, had a conversation with Trey Andre to do Trans Day of Remembrance. So it's going to be a virtual event, but it's also going to be an in-person event as well. Those who are comfortable enough to wear masks and feel that they can sit in the park under a tent. We're going to get a little heating system so don't have to worry about the cold, so that we can actually, do this in-person event and then also do this virtual event. All donations that come in for Trans Day of Remembrance will be to pay the performers their honorariums, their speakers, caterers, and stuff like that for the event itself. And then also any donation that's coming that's left goes back into the Transgender Emergency Fund and possibly healthcare for the homeless, and maybe also possible other entities that can also receive donations for what it is that we raise. Last year they were able to raise about $6,000. We want to try to double that this year or triple it, because we know that the need is great when it comes to this work. And so yeah. So the planning committee has started meeting. The first meeting was this past Monday. You can still sign up and join as well. You can go to Trans Resistance Mass on Facebook and or our webpage, and you can see the link to click to join to help with TDOR, whether it's the planning committee or whatever it is that you see fit that you would like to do. And I think that is it. So keep it in mind, myself and Chastity always say this, that Trans Resistance and the Transgender Emergency Fund are separate entities. Transgender Emergency Fund does the on the floor work as far as getting our girls housing, getting our girls linkage to care and things like that, while Trans Resistance is doing the social justice work and helping to raise funds to keep them afloat, to be able to continue to do the amazing work that they have been doing over the years. So it is a separate entity, but working hand in hand to be sure that our girls are not left behind anymore. That's it.
And we're just used to saying girls, but we mean guys in gender non-conforming, they and them, all inclusive.
Great. Thank you both so much for answering those questions and introducing us to the work that you are doing. So much work that you are doing. So one of the questions I had sent you and that I've been thinking about is, how is the Boston queer community, and like specifically the cis queer community, how are they supporting your work and how aren't they? And what can we do to support the work that you are doing?
So I will say this, because the funny part about supporting this work is that when we first started to plan the march and everything, we had TEF, Transgender Emergency Fund, had already had its own separate sponsors that were already, donating what they could. And somebody in the queer community actually emailed Chastity questioning if the TEF was real. Now, I need to remind you, this person has been donating to TEF for around maybe 3 years. Chastity can correct me if I'm wrong. And so, question her about if it actually was a real nonprofit, because they heard something in the background about it not being a real nonprofit. And so it was disheartening to hear, because they were a person of trans experience and all of that. And it was like, we face, as people of color, we already face, the stigmas that come with that. Being trans and a person of color is even worse. And so it was one of those things that me and Chastity always talked about, is doing this, is that we're going to have to be twice as vigilant, doubly making sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, because we're going to be under a microscope. And the first thing that we talked about is how finances will work and how people would look at us. And the first thing that happened after we talked about that is somebody called and questioned if we actually are actually a real entity, or are we just taking money to spend on ourselves? And it's like, you don't know our lives. You know what I'm saying? You don't know what it is that we go through on a daily basis. I know how to dress up broke and make broke look good. I've been doing it for so long that it's just a habit of mine. I'm not out here living the best life I can because I'm trying to profit off of the hurt from other people. And so it was disheartening to hear it, that it had came from our own community, especially when it's like, what it is that we're trying to do, what it is that we're facing, what it is that we're fighting. Why would you think like that? So that was one of the things about this community, this queer community, that it's just like, I say it all the time, that you don't need the heterosexual community to bash us, because it happens in its own community enough.
And I would just like to say, and that is, I have a lot of queer cisgender allies that have stepped up to the plate. A lot of them who were part of the march, like Sasha Goodford from Mass Equality. She has done more for the Trans Emergency Fund than some of our actual board members, and they identify as trans. So it's just, to me, I like to think of the analogy of when it comes to this whole police situation. There are so many good police officers and there's those shitty ones that make everyone else look bad. And I feel like that's a scenario that could be used in this case. I was just reached out to someone who said they reached out to me and said, oh, can you send me a copy of your bylaws? Because I'm starting the Transgender Emergency Fund of Cape Cod. Now, the Transgender Emergency Fund of Massachusetts, which we serve everyone in Massachusetts. So the Cape Cod falls under Massachusetts. And so it was like, why would you want to duplicate something that's already here instead of seeing how can you collaborate? And their response was, oh, well, just can you be our physical sponsor? Like, it was like, no telling us what you're trying to do. It was like, we're just supposed to roll over and say, well, here you go. And just, take everything that we work for and just here, take it and use it. So it's just like, people don't take us seriously. And I just can't wait to show them that I am not playing. This is not a game. I will die for my community. There's enough of us dying already by the hands of Black men. So we have a lot that we're fighting against, and I'll be damned if I let anybody tear down what I've worked so hard for. So with that all being said, I truly am grateful for my cis allies. They mean so much to me, and I wouldn't be able to do this work without them. And we're always going to have people that's going to come with hatred and try to defy what we're doing. We get so many messages, hate messages through our Instagram page, our Facebook page, and this is to be expected. And what I say is people have too much time on their hands. And if you want to do something, go hit that donate button instead of hitting that hate button, since you have so much time on your hands. But like I said, I think that, thank you for asking that question, because I think people really need to take a step back and realize all the pressure that we are under and how people make that even more difficult for us.
And on top of that, you're providing literally life-saving services to people across Massachusetts and dealing with all of that. And as a note on I see that Steve's been dropping links in the chat. You have amazing social media. Like if any of you use Instagram and you don't follow the Trans Emergency Fund, follow them because they're so good. And yeah, so a couple of the other questions I had for you, and I'm so excited to hear about your goal to have a building and transitional housing for people in Boston. You're looking at Boston specifically. Could you tell me about sort of the intersections with healthcare that you're working with? Because you have goals for some trans health, and I think Athena mentioned Boston Healthcare for the Homeless, and I know you've worked with a few different AIDS-related organizations. Yeah, could you tell us about that?
Definitely. So once we have the building, like I said, one side will be a program where trans-identified individuals will stay anywhere from 3 to 6 months while they get the comprehensive care that is needed, which is, employment assistance, education assistance, and then when it comes to healthcare and mental health, we already will have our own mental health program, but we also partner with Pam Klein at Healthcare for the Homeless. So they have a transgender clinic that is every Thursday from 4 to 8 p.m. They also have a transgender support group. So we refer people to them. And we also refer people to, once again, Pam Klein, who also works at Boston Medical's Transgender Surgical Center, where a lot of our clients access essential surgeries for their transition. And then partnering with people like Athena Vaughn, who still currently works at Fenway Health, on certain things, and we try to refer people to which area is going to suit them best. Fenway Health is not equipped for every trans person, and neither is Healthcare for the Homeless. So we try to refer people to the best place, the best fit for them. And eventually we'll be offering our own healthcare within our own facility, giving out hormones and all of those types of things we see in the near future, counseling and testing through BPHC and also DPH. And also we want to see transgender and gender nonconforming people be our healthcare professionals in the future. So we want to guide them with education and the tools and resources to be able to do so. And with that being said, out of TDOR this year, the portion of funds that are given to us from TDOR, we will be starting our Rita Hester Scholarship Foundation. Starting in 2021, we will be giving out $1,000 scholarships to transgender and gender nonconforming individuals to use towards anything that is school related, books, class fees themselves, whatever it is they need to do with that $1,000. So I'm excited to all the programs that we're going to be able to have once we actually have a facility. And we are in talks with the mayor's office, with city councilors about actually obtaining a building or some land where we may be able to potentially build our own building. Who knows? The possibilities are endless at the moment. But I'm so looking forward to being able to encompass healthcare and housing, because for our community, they go hand in hand. A lot of these agencies right now who claim to serve us, they just want us for numbers and an HIV test. And here's a slice of pizza. If don't know where I'm gonna sleep at that night, I don't care about your test or your slice of pizza. I'm gonna be too busy trying to, unfortunately, use my body to figure out where I'm gonna sleep at night, because that's not an issue that you wanna address. So we want to address all the issues to break that cycle of oppression.
That's amazing. And so exciting. And I wonder, and I'm trying, I'm like floored. I'm trying not to be like weepy over here because it's just like, this is one of those, as a history organization, we often talk to people who have done a lot of work over their career, who have done amazing things and made huge changes, and you're literally doing it right now. And it's so important to hear from you about what it means to do this work, how it's been to do this work, and what you need to have to make it successful. And so it's both like, it's overwhelming, and I'm so happy that there are so many things on the horizon for the Transgender Emergency Fund, and at the same time you have so many other things to overcome too. But like, looking at the future, it sounds amazing. Thinking about historical things though, history as a history lens, are there any like historic figures you look up to? You mentioned that you didn't have too many mentors within the trans community when you started this work. Have you found some, or are you your own mentor?
Definitely can say it that I have found some in doing the work, but first and foremost, I have to pay respect to my ancestor. One for me is Marsha P. Johnson. Just knowing how the movements that she made during the Stonewall riots and how she didn't give up. It's one of the things that keeps me going every day. Like, you know what, she didn't give up, I can't give up. She did it for her community, I need to continue to do it for my community. And to me also, my sister Athena is one of my mentors. We bounce off of each other, we thrive off of each other. And that is, our relationship is a prime example of how community members need to come together and what we can do when we come together. Like, I couldn't do this all by myself. Like, she can do it all by herself. Like, this is not a one-person machine. It takes a group of people. Yes, I did a lot of the grunt work on my own, but at the end of the day, when I have all these brilliant ideas or whatever the case may be, I can't execute them by myself. It takes a brilliant group of people to do the things that we do. So I am just in awe of so many people. Mason Dunn, who was the former director of Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition, who was also my birthday twin. We share the same birthday, same year, same day, everything is crazy. And he is another example of someone who actually got me involved in politics and, you know, was there to coach me during my first testimony at the State House and, you know, things like that. Having people in my corner to uplift me and guide me through certain situations that are new to me has been amazing. So yeah, I have a lot of great mentors. Even Marsha Garber, who is on this phone call right now, who was one of my fellow committee members on MTPC, who has been an amazing contributor to the Transgender Emergency Fund, but has also guided me in some personal ways as well. So it's just, I think that sometimes when people think mentor, they think like, oh, Michelle Obama, and yes, she is one of my mentors. But you have to also recognize the people who are close to you, who are in your city, who you can actually see, feel, touch. Well, used to be able to hug before COVID. All of these things. So I think it's very important to recognize and pay homage to the people who are around you.
Beautiful. So speaking of people around us, is there anyone here on the call that wants to make a comment, talk about how they know Chastity and Athena, ask a question? I see Marsha's been in the chat making comments. And I should say this out loud, making it's a gift and an honor of the memory of Rita Hester to create a scholarship in her name. That's really amazing and super exciting. And you all should be free to unmute yourselves if you would like to. I'll put us in. Or use the hand raise.
Don't make us start calling on people. I see Grace, I see Jessica.
Okay, I'll just congratulate you both for being here and all the projects. It's just overwhelming that that you're just keeping busy and making the work. And that's all I can say.
And I saw one came in the chat, so I'll just read the one that came in the chat. for Michael Cox, and he has a question for Chastity. And he says he would love to hear how Chastity's work intersects with the criminal legal system. If you want to comment anything on that.
That's funny that you asked that question. So I used to sit on Boston Police Department Public Safety team committee, or whatever they call it now, and where I was sitting on these meetings every other month with other local LGBT organizations. And we would sit in a room with all of these detectives, sergeants, and we would go over all the cases that had happened in the past 60 days with LGBTQIA folks in Massachusetts. It was a bit overwhelming. I had to take a step back from those meetings because of some of the things that I was hearing. And people like to say that, oh, Massachusetts is great. It's great for trans people. You're not getting murdered there. Yes, but we are being attacked here. We are being raped here, and it's not hitting the news. So I found myself really conflicted with trying to work with them. But all in all, I know that I'd rather be there to know what's going on than not to be there. So I have recently been back in contact with Richard Dayhill, who is the LGBTQ liaison for BPD. And they actually just sent me some documents today they would like my input to review on some changes that they want to make to their LGBTQ rulings when it comes to arresting and using our direct pronouns and things of that nature. So I'm trying to work with them to the best of my abilities to encourage change for the better. I know that a group of us from that public safety meeting tried to get them to do a training for all of the officers who is paid by Boston Police Department, and we were told that they wanted to do something virtual, that we can do it online training. This is way before COVID. But how many times have we all been on an online training for work or whatever that we were not interested in, and you can play the training and you're on your phone over here, so you have no concept of any type of pronouns, identities, anything, because you really don't care and you weren't paying attention. This is something that I think requires an in-person training by professionals who can speak one-on-one to our issues. And also, I think people take better to a training about trans folks when you have a transgender person in front of you. And so that's where I'm at right now, really, with the legal system and trying to make sure that we are protected in the way that we should. So hopefully I'll be able to do more work with them in the future and possibly get that training off the ground. I think now is a good time to re-ask that ask, because anything they say no to will be scrutinized. So I think right now is a good time that they've reached back out to me, and we'll see how this relationship goes in the future.
I'm happy to jump in. Am I off mute? First, congratulations, Chastity. So well deserved. And Athena and the Transgender Emergency Fund. Sorry I'm late. I had a work thing, so I was planning to get on earlier, but I jumped on here. So sorry I missed the early part, but I just think it's so great that you're being recognized for the work that you're doing and such important work. The trans community here in Boston and Massachusetts has had long challenges for decades, and I know how hard it is to start something new and get support and build something, but it always starts with the need and the heart and the commitment, and you're doing all of those things, and you have our support, and I hope the support of the larger community. So just congratulations. I'm really so glad to be here and share in this recognition and support you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Grace. And we just have to say congratulations to you as well coming up. We will be celebrating Grace soon at the GLAAD Awards because she is an amazing figure in our community.
Thank you.
There's another question that came in the chat from Sarah, and the question is, how can we support efforts to celebrate an inclusive and equitable pride?
So that will be trans resistance. And that is what we are trying to do with trans resistance. We want everything to be equal. We want people to feel included. For the past 4 years now, I've been trying to encourage Boston Pride to, can we have a transgender float? Can we lead the Pride? Can we lead the Pride? And I was always denied. And it's like, how is that being inclusive to us if you will never allow us to lead anything that, let's be honest, that Pride wouldn't be here if it wasn't for transgender people of color. So it's like, why would you never let us lead? So this year is why we're going to start our own transgender march and Pride. It's called a Trans Resistance Transgender March and Pride, but it's inclusive to all LGBTQIA individuals. And so we want our Pride to be, you want to come in and see, it's going to be at Franklin Park next year, COVID permits. And what we would like to see is one big inclusive day where you see so many different people, shapes, sizes, and colors that you're going to be amazed. And that's exactly what our board looks like. It's very diverse. We have people from all different backgrounds on our board. And this is what we want our day to look like. We want everybody to feel like they have a seat at the table and that their voice is being heard, which our voices are often muffled. So if you want to be involved, you can go to Trans Resistance Facebook page, send us a message. We'll put you on our volunteer list because things are going to be moving steadily because it's already October 1st. Time is flying and there's so much to do and so many things to get done. So if you really want to support that cause, we encourage you to go to our Facebook page and sign up.
I'd like to say it's amazing that being denied a seat at the table, you made your own. And I think that's so important to highlight the work that you're doing for the community and also for everyone within the community, not just, you know, one slice of the LGBTQIA pie. And Boston has its own history. I know Marcia mentions in the chat years of struggle, which with any kind of anti-racism or I don't know, it's like what you were saying earlier about, we like to say we're in Massachusetts, things are fine, things are great, and they're not. And you're doing work that is addressing that in a variety of ways within our queer community and also within the wider Massachusetts world, which is so amazing. So do we have any other questions in the chat or anyone else who'd like to chime in? Well, while folks are thinking, Chastity, is there anything else you want to tell us about? I know you've talked about your future plans, and Trans Day of Remembrance is coming up next month, and that'll be online. Yeah, is there anything else, you know, on the horizon you want to tell us about?
Oh yes, this just that's the beginning of so many great things. I can just say now what I see in the future for the Transgender Emergency Fund. Our 5-year plan is to start other chapters in other major cities. So one will be Atlanta, Georgia. I would like to start a Transgender Emergency Fund chapter there. Houston, Texas, that would be another location. And I see myself passing on the director torch here in Massachusetts to Athena, and see myself becoming the regional director overseeing our different emergency funds in the major cities. So it's just exciting to think about the future. It's a lot of work entailed, but I think I'm up for the challenge and just ready to dig in and do the work that we have to do to get there. And I just hope that you all could be along for this ride by staying in contact with us, signing up for our emailing listing, which you can do via our website, and just follow along up some of the things that we have coming up. Last month, we had a very, very important event, which was a conversation between transgender women of color and straight Black men. We are mainly murdered at the hands of straight Black men. So it was like, we need to start that conversation somewhere, somehow. So the Transgender Emergency Fund partnered with the Black Men Foundation, and they provided the Black men, we provided the trans women, and we sat down for our second dinner and discussion. The first one was back in February of 2020, and it went much better than expected. It was a very eye-opening conversation to break down some of these stigmas and stereotypes that are placed on both communities, to come to an understanding to where you don't feel the need that you have to put your hands on us or attack us. And it was interesting to hear some of the things that they would say. Some of the guys were saying, well, like, you know, my mother told me that, you know, if a guy just like a girl, he's a faggot, and if I talk to them, I'm a faggot. And it's just all this foul language that was used and that was drilled into these guys' brains, so that now that they're an adult, they're reacting crazy the way that they do. So it's like breaking down those stigmas. Like, I'm unfortunately, what you learned was wrong, and we all don't want you. We are all not HIV positive. We are all not sex workers. So it's like they had all these preconceived notions about us, and it was amazing to be able to break that down. So we actually had a videographer at the last event who did some shoots, and we're gonna be coming up with a promo video to try to take this conversation on the road. I don't know how much that's going to be with COVID, but we want to take this to other major cities where transgender women are being attacked, mainly at the hands of Black men. So that is another very important thing that we are working on to literally help save lives.
It's amazing.
It's so amazing.
Yeah, so Chastity, I just wanted to give you my sincere congratulations to you and to the Transgender Emergency Fund. Congratulations on this well-deserved award. There it is. Yes. Chastity, I heard you speak, I think at Fenway, maybe through a YLC event a couple of years ago. And I remember thinking 3 years ago, I was like, she works harder than anyone I've ever heard of. And now 3 years later, to see how much more stuff that you are getting done is so impressive. My jaw has been on the floor tonight. This has been just so well deserved, and congratulations on everything that you're doing, everything that you're going to do. We're all right there with you. So no, everyone's muted, but we'll give you the big round of applause.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I just, I get a little weird at these things because it's so not about me. It's so not about me. It's about the people that we do the work for. And I just want to say I really, really appreciate it. And this going to make me go 10 times harder to do what I have to do for our community.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly, that's the work that you're doing, is bringing that attention that it is so so needed. So thank you again.
Yeah.
Okay, and so just to kind of wrap up the event, thank you all for being here. But back to kind of this on the History Project side, over the course of the month of October, to celebrate our honorees, as well as LGBTQ History Month, the History Project is aiming to raise $25,000 to support our work. Work that ranges from building archival collections that tell the complex and diverse histories of our LGBTQ community, to providing spaces both in person and online where community members can come together to learn, to tell their own stories, and to share in creating LGBTQ history, as we've seen here tonight. So as of tonight, the History Project has already raised 40% of that $25,000 goal. And so your support tonight and throughout the month is what makes this work possible. It's what makes it possible for us to put together in-person and online events that challenge and inform and entertain. Your support makes it possible for our activist and archivist volunteers to have a safe place to organize and preserve these historical records, photographs, and publications that tell our community's story. And your support is what makes it possible for us to digitize these historical materials so we can share them with community members and researchers around the world. We all have stories to tell, and it's the mission of the History Project to document and preserve those stories and to share them with the world. So we hope, if you enjoyed tonight's programming, that you'll make a donation tonight to help support the History Project and to reach our fundraising goal. Please visit historyproject.org/support to make a donation. And we'll put that link in the chat, of course, as well. So again, thank you all for being here. We hope that you'll tell everybody else about the History Project. We'll be here, we'll be doing these events every Thursday for the rest of October. And especially if with everything that Chastity and Athena spoke about today, we really hope that you'll take what they said and you'll share that amazing work that Chastity, Athena, and the Transgender Emergency Fund of Massachusetts are doing with people that you know and with your own circles. And so next Thursday, we hope you'll come back. We'll be joined by HistoryMaker Award honoree and trans activist Nancy Nangeroni, who will be in conversation with her partner, Gordine McKenzie. They're out in, I was told that next week they're in New Mexico, so there will be a lot of turquoise. So if you have any turquoise jewelry, that's what you should wear next week. That would be appropriate garb. You can learn more about this event and others by visiting historyproject.org/events. Thank you all for your support and joining us this evening. Thank you again to Chastity and Athena, and good night. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Chastity, let us
Goodbye.
know about your collection. We'll have to establish it in the archives.
Definitely. Bye.
Have a great night.
You too.